You're listening to the Voice of Reason. I'm Dr. Len Saputo here with Francesco Garripoli. Hey, Francesco, how are things?
Doing great, Len. I'm happy to be here with you. We got some really good things to talk about today.
Boy, this has been a week for news, and the stuff that's coming out is just mind-blowing. It's putting pieces of the puzzle together that are just fitting like they're perfect.
It's a complex puzzle, but when we look at each one of them very carefully and look at the facts, it really opens our minds to what COVID-19 really is all about.
I know. And a lot of the things that were conspiracy theories before that you kind of look at and go, somebody's going off the deep end here again. Like with the 5G stuff. You know, when the conspiracy theorists are talking about 5G saying, oh, it's going to cause autism and it's going to cause Alzheimer's and all these other diseases. I'm going, yeah, sure. But, maybe that'll be the case, but let's wait till we have a little data. And it was a little data that was unequivocal that showed that there were biochemical changes that are caused by this 5G system, but not anything like what we're seeing now. I mean, when this study came out of Spain, it blew my mind.
Amazing. Written in Spanish. It was translated. We read the translation. You sent it to me. You could see it was an authentic research from people who are very concerned. Is there some correlation here? The problem with conspiracy theorists is that they tend to pick one thing and say it's the root cause of everything.
Yeah.
But what we're trying to do here in the Voice of Reason is see that how each little thing may contribute to a bigger picture. And that's what I think we're looking at here in 5G, don't you think?
There's no doubt about it that that's exactly what we're looking at. And when it showed the correlation between COVID-19 and the deaths and the incidence of disease and 5G towers, the correlation throughout the world that these Spaniards found was mind-blowing. They explained what happened in San Marino in Italy, where we had the highest death rate and a lot of people getting sick than anywhere in the world. And sure enough, it was the first region in Italy where they had 5G installed.
Yeah.
Same thing with New York.
Yeah. And Len, we're Italian and I have lots of family in Italy.
Me too.
I know for a fact that back in September, the government changed in September, back in 2019. The new government made a deal with China, Huawei and ZTE, to put in 5G. They signed this big deal and they put it in San Marino. They put it in as an example to show the power of 5G. Now, call it a coincidence.
Yeah, right.
But we have to look at these facts.
I don't think it's a coincidence with what this study shows. I mean, they're looking at countries that do have 5G and countries that don't, and then looking at how many people were getting COVID-19 and how many people are dying from it. And it's mind-boggling. It's like the puzzle fits together now. It's just perfect. It sets up right. So now the question is, what do we do with this? I mean, there is a safe way to deliver 5G. It involves fiber optics and putting it under the ground. And it's a solution actually that I recommended months ago when I reviewed the topic. I said, why don't we do that? And of course, the answer was, well, follow the dollars. You can't spend that kind of money. You realize what that'll cost? We could put it in the air and it's a lot cheaper. And then in the meantime, we're doing this global experiment and we're the guinea pigs. Something wrong with that picture, but that's what's happened.
Well, people in my neighborhood have made a decision to put 5G underground in fiber optics, and people have chipped in to make it happen. So there's no towers for a couple of miles from where I am.
That is brilliant.
It's amazing. You can do it. And actually the delivery company didn't care. They actually liked putting they call it fiber. They like putting the fiber underground. And so there are ways to do it. The other thing is, don't buy a 5G phone. You have to ask yourself, what's the price of 5G? How badly do you need this technology? Right now, look what we're doing, Len. You and me are talking on different coasts of the United States in real time with video.
That's right.
I'm happy. I think it's really great. We've got a great quality right now.
Yeah. Well, I think there are a lot of economics involved in this thing.
Oh, well, scary. I mean, from SpaceX's 12,000 satellite deal, okay, 12,000 satellites SpaceX and Elon Musk is putting up there. That's a lot of money. And there's 5 or 6 other companies, including Honeywell, that are delivering it to big businesses and the military. You got to look at this influence.
It's scary. I mean, it's hard to believe that we could let money take precedence over our health and of the future generations of the world. And
Well,
here we are.
Yeah, talk a little bit as a physician, because I want to remind people that you are a doctor, you're an MD, and so you're bringing in this perspective that is very critical right now. What is this fear about 5G and its microwave-like signal on the human body?
Well, it does a lot. I mean, a lot of it you wouldn't think is that serious, because it doesn't just shut you down. What it does is it keeps your mitochondria, those energy packets in your cells, of which you've got thousands, that make something called ATP. You know, gasoline runs a car, ATP runs your body. If you don't make enough ATP, then your whole body doesn't have the reserves that it needs to protect you against diseases. And every chronic disease is associated with a serious deficiency of ATP for certain regions of the body. Now, we know that when you expose people to 5G, that ATP production falls. So you might say, well, but let's correlate that with disease. And the answer is, well, you can't think that way. What you have to think of is what's happening to your body and what's it doing to the wellness reserves that you have. I call that the wellness buffer. Sure. And as we lose that buffer, then say our body has 50% reserves of energy before we start to see failure of an organ and a lot of symptoms. Well, what happens if you just lose 30%? So you don't notice it. You can still function pretty well. Then you lose 10% from something else and 15% for something else, and you're over the top and you go, what happened? Right. When that wellness buffer is gone, you are in trouble. And that's we're eating up our reserves. And that's why we're seeing illness becoming much more prevalent. And it's probably having a lot to do with COVID-19.
Sure. Well, what did we used to say? Your grandparents used to talk about the straw that broke the camel's back.
Exactly.
Right? So it wasn't like somebody put a 10-ton brick on the back of that poor camel.
Right.
They put straw after straw after straw, and incrementally that pack became so heavy that poor camel couldn't handle it. It's the same thing with our immune system. You can have a relatively healthy person can take on a battery. That's why teenagers don't worry about things, right? Your immune system's on fire. If you believe in the traditional Chinese medicine idea, the Jing Qi is powerful. In our Qigong world, we talk about this. But as we get older, those reserves, as you just mentioned, start to drop. And now you have to be more and more careful about that straw that could chip away at your immune system. It's just common sense.
Yeah, it is. And you can't undo it so easily. So now you've put the last straw on the camel's back and it collapses. Take off that piece of straw and see what happens. Camel's still going to be down there because it takes a lot when a system has failed to restore it back to normal. So when we're looking at something like 5G and saying, oh, well, who's really sick? Show us the data, doctor. And there isn't good data out there. Now we do have data that correlates this, and it does it in a very serious way. And it's very clear. I mean, you can even look at the case of it in Africa. You would think that, well, Africa, the vast majority of it doesn't have 5G, and it doesn't have much COVID-19 either. And people aren't dying from it, except in South Africa, where they do have 5G, and there's a hotspot there too.
Right.
It's that way for so many countries.
Yep. And when you look at the numbers and the deaths in cities, yes, there is a lot more people in a city, of course. So there's going to be higher death proportionally. But there's also the 5G implementations are happening in the high density cities. So we've really got to look at this. And I think as an individual, you've got to decide some really important things. Like, do you want a 5G phone? As bad as you may want to be on top of technology, is this really going to be a good decision? These are the kind of choices we can make.
Yeah. Is it worth the convenience?
Is it worth the convenience?
Yeah, because you chip away, and once you've chipped away and you've gone off that cliff, if you have two lungs, you have two sides of your brain, and if you are two kidneys, you lose one of those things, you can still function. But I'll tell you what, as you get near that 50% mark or 60% mark, and then you go a little bit worse, you go off a cliff and everything falls apart. Then you can't restore it. And that's what 5G is doing, is it's lowering our resistance, the strength that we have in our immune system and every other system of our body, so that we can't stand the insults that occur just in ordinary living, and then try to fix it. Then you can have hospitals full of people, just like we have today.
And as you said, you compromise the ATP cycle. I remember that from pre-med.
Yeah,
You
sure.
know, you see this ATP cycle. If you interrupt that, your energy reserves are down. But also just the battering of these kinds of frequencies, this is what throws cell mutation into high gear, right? This is a lot of cancers are created from these kinds of signals. We see it. We have lots of data around this.
Well, every illness that there is, okay, all illnesses are associated with a decrease in ATP production.
Mm.
So it's the final common pathway where all of a sudden you see disease manifesting. And once that's happened, you've got a whole lot of work to get back up to that level where you're making enough ATP and you can restore the function of the organs that are lost. So
Wow.
that's what we're facing here. And this study that came out of Spain is just shocking.
It's excellent. And there have been a lot of studies up to now that no one really wants to look at. And a lot of them were, uh, they had preconceived notions about how bad 5G was. And I
Yeah,
know my friends in Hawaii are working really hard to keep 5G from happening,
yeah,
but the military is
mm,
depending on 5G.
yeah,
And I already mentioned Honeywell has a big contract to put up. I think they have about
yeah.
2,100 satellites they're going to put up specifically for big business and military. So there's so much money behind from the military, from entertainment. Elon Musk with his big talk about technology. Remember his great
Mm,
grandfather, or his grandfather actually, was the big head of technocracy, you know,
wow,
technology leading people in Canada
wow.
years ago. So this is a problem. This is a real problem but people are, each choice you make, you're feeding the problem. So we have to try to make good choices.
Yeah. We have to go back to the real root problem of what's happening. When you put money in front of service and you put that in front of the development of community and you live in a narcissistic adversarial world where you're protecting yourself and you're not worried about sharing, giving, and loving and building community, you've got a fundamental flaw that crosses every boundary that we have. We have fundamental flaws in business and law and medicine and science and sport, every aspect of our culture. And until we evolve to a higher level of consciousness, we're going to see things like this repeating themselves over and over. We're learning the hard way. We got to go back to the basics. We got to have a voice of reason where we start to pay attention to things like this. And that's what this show is about. So stay tuned. We'll be back again tomorrow with another episode of The Voice of Reason.